You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. Learn about hoarding disorder from me, somebody who has it. I promote a better understanding of hoarding disorder, a stigmatised mental health condition that is mocked rather than treated with compassion. I want to change that, and by talking openly and honestly about hoarding, I hope to start conversations that help. Find out how to support the podcast at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. This episode is sponsored by Cambridge University Press, publisher of Dr. Lynn Drummond's new book, Everything You Need to Know About Hoarding. Struggling with hoarding disorder, feeling ashamed or guilty about your belongings and afraid to let them go is more common than you might think, affecting up to 6% of the general population. But despite its prevalence, seeking help can be challenging. This new book provides a clear description of hoarding, exploring it as a symptom of other issues as well as a condition in its own right. You'll learn about different treatment options and find step-by-step guidance and tools for recovery in the self-help section. Personal narratives and case studies make this guide accessible and relatable for those affected by hoarding, as well as their loved ones and health professionals. Don't let hoarding disorder control your life. Take the first step towards recovery today with this invaluable resource. Everything you need to know about hoarding is out now. Buy your copy at cambridge.org/everythinghoarding, and the E and the H in everything hoarding are capital letters. Get 20% off with discount code HOARDING20. Hey, how are you? I am well.
Let's start with some housekeeping.
Tiny little bit of housekeeping today before I get into the meat of the episode, or the meat substitute of the episode if you prefer. I have added some new dates in the calendar for Dehoarding Accountability Zoom sessions. So if you would like to come along, chat with other people who hoard, get some dehoarding done as we chat, do head to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket to grab your ticket. There are now dates through July, August, September and October in the calendar. It would be amazing to see you there. So today I'm talking about what might sound like a bit of a radical or even terrifying idea. And that is the idea of allowing yourself to make more mistakes. Allowing yourself to let yourself run out of things deliberately. Allowing yourself to do things badly, or at least mediocrely. Because a lot of us feel paralysed by the idea of making a bad decision. And that fear of making a wrong decision can prevent us from getting rid of things, can prevent us from resisting something in a sale, and can keep us really stuck where we are. Similarly, worrying about not having enough of something, worrying about running out of something, can be so terrifying that we overstock everything without ever really thinking, okay, but what would happen if I ran out of pasta sauce? And realising, oh, I'd have something else for my tea. But we often don't think it all the way through and go, oh no, what if I run out of pasta sauce? I'd better buy 12 jars. The fear of not being able to do something perfectly and the fear of not having enough can really keep us stuck in hoarding behaviours and can prevent us from dehoarding. These fears are really deeply ingrained. They're part of what got us to this place. And the idea of challenging them might sound terrifying, but hear me out, because there are ways to do this that are less terrifying and that test the idea out and allow us to feel some of that uncertainty and risk, but not in a way that is threatening. Because in fact, allowing ourselves to make mistakes, allowing ourselves to run out of things, allowing ourselves to do things in a half-arsed way can actually be really liberating. It can be really freeing, especially if we're not reckless about it, but we just allow ourselves some leeway with the perfectionism that might really be keeping us in a cage. This isn't a quick fix episode. This is a big mindset one, but it's one of the tools that can be really helpful to free us up to actually make better decisions because we're risking making poor decisions. So there are two core ways of thinking that this episode is going to look at and challenge. And both of them are very common in people who hoard. So it is likely that you will recognize yourself in one or both of them. For me, definitely both of them. So one is perfectionism and the other is fear of scarcity. So let's look at perfectionism first. The fear of making a wrong decision, for instance, getting rid of something that we later want, can lead us to not make any decisions at all, just shut down, or it can lead us to make a decision but to keep everything. And what we are trying to do is discard at least some of the things we possess. That uncertainty about the future and anxiety about that can link in very closely with perfectionism, and that fear about the uncertainty of what the future holds, whether we will get to the end of our 342 pens and wish we'd kept that green one, can just make us opt out of getting rid of anything. Also in perfectionism, we often see all or nothing thinking, and that makes us think that if we can't do a job perfectly, there's no point bothering. Or if we don't know precisely how to do something, or if we can't do a brilliant job, there's no point even trying. No point starting. And that leads to overwhelm and it leads to inaction. It leads us to not doing anything. This definitely kept me stuck for years and still creeps into my brain a lot. I have to be very proactive in challenging that kind of, if I can't do it properly, there's no point trying. And the other root that I mentioned is the fear of scarcity and that sense that we have to keep it in case we need it. And this can stem from all kinds of things. For me, a lot of it comes from a period in my early 20s when I had no income for a long time and then a very small income for a long time. And I didn't have enough money for food, for soap, for anything. I didn't have any money. And it was a horrible time and very demoralizing, very humiliating, and very undignified. But what it also did was teach me that if I got rid of anything, there's no way I could replace it. Because that, for that period of time, was true. If I got rid of a bottle of shampoo, I wouldn't be able to buy shampoo to use. And that is no longer the case. I am not well off, not close to well off. However, I can buy food and shampoo and the things I need and even the odd treat. And that's lovely, but there's some part of my brain that is still conscious that 25 years ago I was in a desperate state. And I think that fear of, if I get rid of this, I might be really stuck, it just ingrained itself in there. And I think on top of that, there's the fact that I know that that can happen to a person. And you like to think it can't, but it can, and it did. And so in my bones, I know that that's a possible future for any of us. And it is hard to shake that, even when my life is very different now. Your experiences that lead you to that fear of scarcity might be something else entirely. You might be very afraid of what's going to happen politically, or you might be very afraid of another pandemic, or you might have just been brought up very frugally by parents who lived through the Second World War and rations and all of that. Or there might be no deep psychological cause. You might just be really terrified of running out of things. Whatever the reason for it, it can get in the way. It can become almost irrational, I would say, the number of things we feel we have to hold on to just in case. And all of these things, the perfectionism, the fear of scarcity or the fear of running out, can really fuel what we keep, what we don't discard, and also what we acquire. We can generate more clutter because we think those razors are on offer, so I'd better buy 10 packs so that I don't run out because they're really cheap on offer and they're normally quite expensive. Or you might see a wooden desk by the side of the road that somebody's left out to be collected, and you think, I never know when I might need a wooden desk. I better take that home with me. And then once you're at home and you're looking at your 2,500 books and thinking, well, I better not get rid of any of these just in case I need them. And then you look at your desk and think, well, I can't possibly sort this out. It's absolute chaos. And if I can't do it properly, there's no point even trying. And then you sit down to sort out your craft stuff and you think, I don't even know how to do this. There's no point bothering. And so those root things of the fear of mistakes, the perfectionism, and the fear of running out, the fear of scarcity, can really actively make hoarding behaviours considerably worse. And so the things I'm talking about today are things that gently challenge both of those root belief systems that we have about perfectionism and fear of scarcity. Dehoarding darlings are a special group of listeners who go the extra mile to support the podcast. They get an extra written post every month with links, answers to extra questions from guests, recommendations, and a dehoarding playlist. You can become a dehoarding darling and help to support the future of the podcast, as well as getting this monthly blog post at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. So first of all, I want to talk about embracing mistakes. I do not embrace my own mistakes. I need to be clear. I am very self-critical. But we are taught to see mistakes as failures, and I don't think really that that's true. Mistakes can be failures. I don't think they necessarily are. They are often ways we learn. They are things that can motivate us to change our behaviour. And the idea of allowing yourself to make mistakes might be better framed as allowing yourself to do things differently, because it challenges the idea that there is ever a perfect or correct decision. This idea that we have to get every decision right is not only incredibly difficult a standard to live to, it is also probably impossible because very few decisions are that black and white. When we make mistakes, big and small, if we can see that as, okay, I did that and it felt like that. That doesn't feel good. I'm going to try not to do that again. Or I did that and it didn't feel good, but then it felt fine quite quickly. So that's actually okay to do again. Or I took a risk with that thing and I was anxious because I was taking a risk. But what I learned from that is this. Or I did that and it feels terrible. I'm not going to do that again. Even if looking at this in a very specifically hoarding context, even if we take a risk and get rid of something we might later want, and then we do later want it, Let's think that through for a second, because that might immediately sound like a devastating and terrifying mistake. But often it isn't. It might sting for a minute, might sting for a while. But the opposite of that is keeping hold of everything, which creates its own problems. Because we might still want or need that thing and it's broken at the bottom of a pile, or we might still want and need that thing and it's in one of the downstairs rooms in a box, but we've no idea where. The cost of holding on to everything is often higher than the occasional regret about not acquiring something or about discarding something. When we make mistakes and actually reflect on them and observe our own reaction to them, we can learn an awful lot. We might learn that when we discard something, we feel a panic for about an hour, or 24 hours, or 10 minutes, or 5 seconds. We're all different. And then it subsides, and we feel really proud that we got rid of that thing. Or we might learn we're immediately elated once it's gone. Or we might learn that we feel fine at first and then the regret kicks in and then we feel fine again. But when we can take these slight risks and observe what happens, like a science experiment, let's collect data on the different outcomes rather than the alternative, which is often avoiding making any decisions at all, or making decisions to keep everything or acquire everything. When we actively make decisions and risk making mistakes, because we're all human and we will, in every area of our life, not just in terms of hoarding, but we will find that the vast majority of our decisions ultimately are really positive, which helps us to build confidence in our ability to make decisions. And building confidence in our ability to make decisions helps us to make future decisions. Not ever taking risks and not ever risking making a mistake means that we avoid everything, and in 5 years' time we're still exactly where we are now, if not in a worse position. And as well as allowing ourselves to risk making mistakes, we can even make decisions that we know are mildly unwise. And again, test out how that goes. Is it as disastrous as we fear? Or is it mildly annoying? Does it disrupt our entire lives? Or does everything just carry on as normal? We can try this stuff out, experiment with it, get curious about how it feels, get curious about what happens. If you are a perfectionist type like me, that might all sound impossible, but that's why starting small with these things is important. Don't start with World War II love letters between your grandparents. Instead, start with 5 of the 18 pairs of scissors you've got in your kitchen drawer. Don't start with your final toilet roll in a pandemic. Start with your 12th bottle of shampoo. We don't have to make disastrous decisions because life isn't all or nothing, but we can both risk making decisions and we can test out making mildly unwise decisions. And in a similar way, and still very linked to the perfectionism piece, is this idea of allowing ourselves to do things badly. Done is better than perfect. You'll have heard that 1,000 times. But if you have hoarding disorder, any kind of action we can take is a step closer to where we want to be. And that all or nothing thinking that a lot of us are very prone to often actually means we do nothing, because very few of us have the capacity or the energy or the time to do all. Will we ever feel like we're capable of perfection? Probably not. So if the only alternative is nothing, we'll do nothing. So if we think about allowing ourselves to do things badly, allowing ourselves to half-arse things, we can do a bit of something. We can do something half-heartedly. We can spend 5 minutes on something instead of 5 hours. We can sort through old papers from 25 years ago that almost certainly have no value, while our mind is on something else because that's almost certainly going to be fine. Half-arsing it means we can do a bit, means we can do it half-heartedly. It means we can do it badly. We can allow ourselves to sort out half a shelf instead of a shelf. It means we can donate half a bag of stuff without waiting to choose any more clothes to donate. It means we don't have to pick the perfect spot to start with. We can just start where we are. It means doing it in more manageable chunks, because every action, even if it's tiny, even if it's imperfect, helps to move us to a place where we're making progress and where we can see progress. And that is when it starts to feel more manageable and more possible. It proves to us, oh, I can do something. I can make progress. Progress is possible. So let's think about this other idea of allowing ourselves to run out of things. I've been noticing recently about the extra creativity and resourcefulness we get when we're running out of something, or when we don't have a lot of something. If I haven't been shopping and I don't have much fresh veg in the fridge, I have to get a bit creative with my cooking if I'm running out of things to cook with. So I'm suddenly exploring the tins in the back of the cupboard and the things in the back of the freezer, and coming up with sometimes amazing new combinations that I would never have thought of if I'd had the usual big pile of veg and stuff in the fridge that I know what I'm doing with. Similarly, because I'm in this colourful journaling period, a lot of that is like cutting up magazines and tearing things up and gluing them down, making collages. And I love it. It's really, really helping me work some stuff out. But it's a challenge to my perfectionist thinking, because you have to just work with what you've got. And working with what you've got forces you to think differently. I was talking to a friend about this who also makes collages, and I was saying how I use Photoshop a lot in work, and how when I make a collage I'm often really frustrated that I can't just resize an image or flip an image to face the other way or that kind of thing. And my friend said, yeah, that's true, but actually what that does is make you think on your feet, make you think creatively and change how you do it as you go. And it's true, because with collages, you often make something a bit different to what you had in mind because of what's available to you in the 10 magazines you've got, or the old book that you're cutting up, or whatever. And that is sometimes frustrating, but it's also quite freeing, and it makes you a lot more resourceful, and it also makes you less stuck on your original idea and instead makes you think on your feet as you go. So I talked earlier about the anxieties a lot of us have around that fear of scarcity and that fear of running out. And often we react to that by thinking, I will just gather as much as I can and cling on to it. And what we're seeking is a kind of abundance. But actually, living an abundant life doesn't mean having so many things that we can't move around. That's not an abundant life. That's a really limited and controlled and imprisoned life. An abundant life is not about owning every object. It's about having what we need, or being able to get what we need, but also having the space to live. And a while ago, I mentioned in a conversation with Jan, Dr. Jan Eppingstall, about how I was testing out letting myself run out of certain things. And I've been doing that for a while now. And obviously you have to think this through. You don't want to run out of soap. You don't want to run out of tea bags. But there are things that it turns out, absolutely fine to run out of, or it's a mild inconvenience to run out of. And those things might vary from person to person. But while I don't want to run out of soap, if I run out of rice, that's mildly annoying, but I can eat something else. I don't want to run out of toilet paper, but I can run out of kitchen roll. Again, mildly annoying, but fine until I next go to the shop. And if our instinct is always, oh, I better buy more in case I run out, it's worth, what I've been doing anyway, is challenging that each time I think it and thinking, is this something that would be truly a pain to run out of? Or is this something that I can do without for a few days until I next get to the shop? And often just asking that question is clarifying enough. And I realise that actually it would be a mild inconvenience, or I'd barely notice it at all, when the alternative to that is having a house crammed full of things. And so it turns out when I ask the question, I would rather run out of rice temporarily than have a kitchen jam-packed with extra rice just in case. If you have rice for every meal, that may not be the case for you. I'd hate to run out of pasta. And so I don't. But I rarely eat pasta sauce out of jars, so I don't need a cupboard full of those. I can just have one or two for the occasions I don't want to make my own pasta sauce. And if I run out of those, nothing terrible at all will happen. Thinking through the reality of what would it actually be like to run out of this? How easy would it be to replace if I did run out? You will start to prioritise and work out, okay, I definitely don't want to run out of this thing. But actually, spending a few days or a few weeks without one of these, I'd barely notice. Like, I could run out of multivitamins without really paying any attention. I don't want to run out of my antidepressant. It's that kind of calculation, whereas previously I treated everything as, I'd better not run out of this, I'd better get extra in case I run out, without ever questioning, would it really be that bad to run out of this? The other thing about allowing ourselves to run out is it helps me at least to assess that thing's use in my life. Previously, I would be replacing things just in case they ran out. And so I never experienced life without those things. And some things I think, oh no, I don't want to run out of that. And then I do run out of it and realise it's fine. I don't know if I even need to replace it. Or we might find, okay, I really miss that thing. And then when we get some more, we can say, okay, that does have value in my life. But consuming when we need to consume versus just in case is better for our wallets, it's better for our homes, and it's better for the environment as well. We don't want to keep acquiring and acquiring and acquiring. This cycle of consumption is exhausting us. It's exhausting our bank accounts, and it's exhausting the planet. Keeping spares of everything just in case is not a cost-free exercise. Obviously, it costs us money, but it costs us space, and that costs us mental well-being, sometimes physical well-being. And so think, before you replace something automatically in advance of running out of it, think through, what is this something I can risk running out of temporarily? Or maybe pick one type of item that you're going to make sure you run out of before you replace it. It might be freezer food. It might be magazines to read. But maybe pick a category and test it out on that. All of these ideas tie in to something I've talked about a number of times, which is allowing ourselves to experiment. When I started treating dehoarding tasks as experiments rather than things I could either pass or fail at, it freed me up to try. Because if something went wrong, I hadn't failed. It was just data. It was just something I would learn from. It was information that would then help me to make my next decision in a more informed way. It is not a pass or fail situation. It's something we are constantly learning and adjusting and learning and adjusting. If we treat the outcomes of the decisions we make as data, as experiment, as evidence, that can free us up to do things a bit differently. And also, it can challenge those fears that have been holding us back and keeping us tied up and stuck. These fears and beliefs we have about perfectionism, about scarcity, about getting things wrong, about loss and fear, hold us back so much. And being curious about how things look if we do it a bit differently, and experimenting with small, gentle decisions at first, is how we start to just expand our horizons a little bit. And with those small, tiny, if you need to, experiments with low stakes objects or areas or stuff we don't especially care about, it also helps us to build confidence and build that dehoarding muscle so that by the time we get to the bigger decisions or the harder decisions, we've got a bit of strength and experience under our belt. Think about doing things in a way that is good enough, not perfect. Think about allowing ourselves to do something in a half-hearted way. Think about trying something out for a short period of time. What happens if I do this for a day or for a week or for a month? Let's see how that goes. Allow yourself to run out of conditioner. Allow yourself to run out of printer paper. And when you take any steps, even the imperfect ones, or especially the imperfect ones, give yourself a bit of a high five, because even if we execute things badly, even if a step is tiny, still it's effort, it's learning, and it gets us one step closer. Done is better than perfect. We have to start, even if we start badly, even if we make a mistake, we'll make 100 decisions that are not mistakes. And actually, living as we live, certainly living as I live, is the product of about 50,000 mistakes. And maybe risking making mistakes in terms of discarding is less of a mistake than carrying on as I am.
It's top tip time.
So my top tip this week is to think of somebody from your past who did something for you that felt really significant to you, and drop them a line and thank them. I've done this twice recently. I was thinking about a girl from school who did something that probably felt small to her, but that was really meaningful to me at the time. And I was telling someone else about it. And I said, it's weird, I've never actually said this to her, but we're not really in touch. We're, connected on Facebook, but haven't spoken to her for years. And my friend said, no, tell her. I think she'd love to hear it. So I dropped her a message and I said, sorry if this is weird, but when we were at school, you did this, and it really meant a lot to me because of this. And I just wanted to thank you. And I'm sorry if this is weird. And she was so touched. She didn't remember the thing I was thanking her for, but she loved that she'd done something that quietly helped me through a rough time. And similarly, there was a guy I was at university with, and I was kind of buoyed on by that conversation I'd had with her. And there was a guy I was at university with who came to visit me when I was in hospital, and it meant a lot to me because I didn't know him that well, and so it meant a lot to me that he'd made the effort to come and see me in hospital. So buoyed up by the conversation I'd had with the girl from school, I messaged him as well, and I said, that time you came to see me in hospital, that meant a lot to me, and we've been chatting ever since. Both of them were really, really chuffed to have had those messages, which made them feel good, which then made me feel good. So my top tip this week is think of somebody who did something meaningful to you in the past, even 50 years ago. Drop them a line and thank them. They might have no idea that they had a positive impact on you. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to that Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.